My own children sold me off like an old piece of furniture, while I pretended to sleep, hearing every venomous word that spilled from their rotten mouths. Once the old woman dies in the facility, we'll split everything 50-50, Chase whispered to Piper as he counted the bills he had just taken from my safe. Hopefully, it won't be long now. I'm tired of pretending to love her, my daughter-in-law replied, that snake I had welcomed into my home like my own daughter. There I stood, Autumn, 66 years old, hidden behind my own bedroom door, watching my children plan my demise as if they were organizing a vacation. Skylar held my last will and testament in her dirty hands, laughing because she thought I had hidden it well. Look at this, brother. It says here she leaves everything to us in equal parts. Good thing she never noticed we'd already read it. The stench of betrayal filled my house, mingled with Piper's cheap perfume, and the smoke from the cigarette Chase was puffing on my green velvet sofa, the sofa I had bought when they were children and I still believed in family love. The light from the crystal lamp, once my mother's, illuminated their devilish faces as they carved up my life like butchers. The facility in Asheville is paid for 6 months, Skylar said, looking at her phone. By the time the money runs out, she'll be so sick she won't know what's happening anymore. The three of them laughed like hungry hyenas, and I felt something die in my chest. It wasn't my heart, it was my faith in humanity. Piper took my pearl necklace from the jewelry box, the necklace that had belonged to my grandmother, and put it on in front of the mirror as if it were already hers. This will go perfectly with my dress for my sister's wedding, she murmured, stroking each pearl, which carried more history than her entire family combined. Chase clapped like a trained seal. You look beautiful, darling. That necklace always suited you better than the old woman. The word old woman came from my own son's mouth like filth. This boy, whom I had raised with love, nourished with my own milk, nursed when he had pneumonia and the doctors said he might die. This boy now called me old woman, as if I were trash to be discarded. My body trembled with suppressed rage as I watched Skylar open my photo albums and toss them one by one into the garbage. 40 years of memories, first smiles, first steps, happy birthdays. Everything landed in the trash as if it had never existed. Why would she need photos where she's going? She said with a cruelty that made my blood run cold. Chase opened my laptop and began sifting through my bank accounts with a smile that made my stomach churn. Look at this. The old woman has more money than we thought. We can buy the lakefront condo Piper wanted so badly. My daughter-in-law bounced with joy like a spoiled child. Yes, and we can also take that European trip we could never afford. Europe with my money, an apartment bought with my labor, luxury funded by my sacrifice, all paid for with the lifeblood of a woman who had worked herself to death to give them a better life. And this was how they thanked me, by planning my exile while spending my inheritance before I was even dead. The grandfather clock in the living room chimed 9 o'clock that evening when Piper asked, "What if the old woman puts up a fight tomorrow?" Chase laughed with a malevolence that sent shivers down my spine. Everything is taken care of. Dr. Austin will help us. We'll say she has senile dementia and can't take care of herself. The papers are ready. Dr. Austin, my trusted doctor, the same man who had managed my health for 15 years, was also involved in the conspiracy. The man to whom I had entrusted my pains, my fears, my medical secrets, had betrayed me for a few dollars. My own doctor would claim I was insane to justify my forced removal. That night, I couldn't close my eyes. I lay awake in my bed, the bed where I had mourned my husband's death, where I had dreamed of watching my grandchildren grow up, where I had planned to age gracefully. Now, this bed felt like a coffin, in which I awaited my living burial. Morning arrived like a death sentence. I woke with the bitter taste of betrayal in my throat and pretended I had slept well, though I had spent the entire night planning an escape from the trap my own children had set for me. The scent of freshly brewed coffee wafted from the kitchen. The same coffee I had made for them for decades, now made by them to celebrate my living farewell. Skylar knocked on my bedroom door with those gentle knuckles that used to soothe me, but now sounded like hammer blows. "Good morning, Mama. Sleep well." Her false, saccharine voice made me nauseous. I slowly got up, feigning the frailty they wanted to see, while inwardly boiling with suppressed rage.
I descended the stairs, holding onto the banister like a helpless old woman.
Every step was calculated so they wouldn't realize I had seen through their devilish plan. The living room looked the same as the night before, but in the daylight, everything felt different. My furniture, my memories, my whole life felt alien, as if they no longer belonged to me. Chase sat in my favorite armchair, reading the newspaper with the composure of a man who had already won the war. He wore the blue shirt I had given him for Father's Day, a shirt that now seemed like the costume of a loving son. "Good morning, Mama," he said, without looking up from the newspaper, as if it were a normal day and not the day they intended to banish me forever. Piper was in the kitchen, preparing breakfast, using my Chinese porcelain dishes, which I only brought out for special occasions. How ironic that my last breakfast at home was served on the dishes meant for grand celebrations. "I made your favorite toast, mother-in-law," she said with that fake smile I now recognized as pure acting. I sat at the table where I had eaten breakfast for 30 years, celebrated birthdays, and shed tears. Now it would bear witness to my last meal as a free woman. The bread tasted like cardboard. The orange juice was sour. Everything had lost its flavor since I had learned the truth about my children. "Mama, we have a surprise for you," Skylar announced in that sing-song voice she used as a child when she had been up to mischief. She pulled a golden envelope from her purse, the kind used for elegant invitations. "We're giving you a trip to North Carolina, to a beautiful place where you'll meet people your age and be super comfortable." The envelope contained the documents of my condemnation, disguised as a gift, plane tickets, information about the facility, medical authorizations, all perfectly planned to look like an act of filial love, rather than the crime it was. The photos of the place showed immaculate gardens and bright rooms, but I knew it would be my golden prison. "I don't want to go anywhere," I said with the firmest voice I could muster. "I'm happy here in my home." Chase slammed the newspaper onto the table with a hard thud that made the cups rattle. "Mama, you can't live alone anymore. Yesterday you forgot to turn off the gas stove. You could have caused an explosion." A lie. I had never forgotten anything. But that would be their excuse to the world. Piper came closer and took my hands with that false tenderness she had perfected over the years. "Autumn, my dear, it's for your own good. There you'll have nurses around the clock, activities, homemade meals, everything you need at your age." At my age, as if 66 years old automatically meant mental incompetence. "Besides," Skylar added, while fiddling with her phone, "we've already spoken with Dr. Austin and he agrees. He says you need constant medical supervision." The name Austin hit me like another dagger. My trusted doctor, who knew every one of my ailments, every one of my worries, had betrayed me for money. Chase stood up and began pacing the living room like a caged lion. "The plane leaves this afternoon, Mama. Everything is arranged. There's no turning back." This afternoon. I had only a few hours of freedom left before I would be deported like a criminal to a strange state, where I was to die alone and forgotten. And what if I don't want to? I asked, though I knew the answer, but I had to hear it from their mouths. The three exchanged glances with the complicity of criminals who had rehearsed every step. "This isn't a choice, Mama," Skylar replied with a coldness that chilled me to the bone. "We've legally signed all the papers. We are your guardians." Guardians. My own children had become my masters while I slept, trusting in their love. They had used my trust, my unconditional love, my blind faith in family, to legally enslave me. It was the masterpiece of a perfect deception. Piper went into my bedroom to help me pack, but in reality, to make sure I didn't take anything valuable. She searched every drawer, every corner, every place I might have hidden jewelry or important documents. "You don't need much, Autumn," she said, dividing my life into two piles, what I was allowed to take and what would remain theirs. My family photos landed directly in the trash pile. "You'll have activities there to keep you busy. You won't have time for nostalgia," she declared, as she threw away the photo of my wedding, the photo of Chase's birth, the photo of Skylar's first day of school. 40 years of family history, deleted like spam on a computer. The scent of my home faded, replaced by Piper's aggressive perfume and the disinfectant with which they wiped away every trace of my existence. It was as if they were erasing me from the face of the earth before I had even left. The most humiliating moment came when there was a knock at the door and Dr. Austin appeared with his black medical bag and the smile that used to calm me. "Autumn, dear, how are you?" he asked with that honeyed voice I now recognized as pure falsehood. He had come to examine me and sign the papers that would certify my alleged dementia. The document that would legalize my abduction. "Sit here, Autumn," he said, pointing to the sofa where I had so often received guests. Now I was the unwanted visitor in my own living room. Dr. Austin opened his bag with the calm of a man who had done this 1,000 times, and pulled out medical instruments that gleamed in the light like butcher's tools. Chase sat beside me, holding my arm with that feigned tenderness that disgusted me. "Calm down, Mama. The doctor just wants to make sure you're well for the trip." The trip? What a lovely word to disguise a forced banishment. Piper filmed everything with her phone, creating evidence of their concern for my well-being. "Autumn, do you remember what you had for breakfast today?" Dr. Austin asked, writing my answers in a notebook. Every question was a trap. Every answer, another strand in the rope that would legally strangle me. "Do you know what day it is? Do you know the name of the president?" Questions designed to confuse me, to make me doubt my own sanity. Skylar came closer, with false tears streaming down her cheeks. "Doctor, yesterday she forgot to turn off the stove. We're very worried. We don't know what else might happen." Lie after lie, they built an alternative reality in which I was a senile old woman who had to be institutionalized for her own protection. "Besides," Piper added, with an acting performance that deserved an award, "we saw her wandering through the house in her pajamas last night, thinking there were burglars. We believe she's having hallucinations." Halluzinations? How ironic. The only burglars in this house were the three of them, stealing my dignity in broad daylight. Dr. Austin nodded with that false wisdom of a man who had long since made up his mind. "This is normal at your age, Autumn. The brain declines and requires constant supervision." My brain was perfectly fine, clear enough to see through their plan and plot my revenge. "But doctor," I said with the shakiest voice I could feign, "I feel fine here in my home. I don't want to go anywhere." My words bounced off the walls like screams in a vacuum. No one heard me, no one believed me, no one defended me. It was as if I stood before a court where all the judges had already determined my guilt. Chase showed Dr. Austin a stack of papers from his briefcase. Powers of attorney, medical authorizations, documents that legally rendered me incompetent. "We have everything prepared, doctor. We just need your signature to make it official." The signature that would bury me alive, that would turn me into a ghost of my own existence. "Autumn, this is for your own good," Dr. Austin said, signing each document with a golden pen that gleamed like blood-stained gold. "In North Carolina, you'll be better cared for. You'll have companionship, activities, everything a woman your age needs." A woman my age, as if 66 were an incurable disease. Piper helped me put on my coat, the black coat I had bought for my husband's funeral, which would now serve for my social burial. "You look great, Autumn," she lied, buttoning it up as if I were a small child. "You'll make lots of new friends." Outside, a taxi waited with the engine running, like a hearse ready to take me to my final destination. Chase carried my small suitcase, a suitcase barely containing the necessities for survival, while they kept a house full of memories and treasures I had collected over decades. Skylar hugged me at the door, and for a moment, just for a moment, I thought there might be a spark of real love in that embrace. "We'll visit you soon, Mama," she whispered in my ear, but her words sounded hollow like a politician's election promises. "Take care of yourselves," I said, looking at them one last time as they stood in the doorway of my house, knowing it was probably the last time I would see them. Chase raised his hand in a farewell that looked more like a papal blessing than the goodbye of a loving son. The taxi slowly drove through the street where I had spent my entire adult life, where I had raised my children, where I had planned to grow old surrounded by family love. Now, this street became a memory, a mental photograph I had to preserve forever. Piper was already in the garden, watering my plants, as if she were the new mistress of the house. Chase had gone back inside, probably to plan the auction of my furniture. Skylar waved until the house disappeared from my sight, playing grief until the last second. During the ride to the airport, the taxi driver tried to strike up a conversation. "Vacation?" he asked, looking at me in the rearview mirror. "Something like that," I replied, for how could I explain to a stranger that my own children had sold me off like old cattle? How could I tell him I was on my way to exile, disguised as a gift? At the airport, Chase handed me the travel documents like an employee of a travel agency. "Everything's in order, Mama. Someone from the facility will be waiting for you at the airport." Someone from the facility? I didn't even know the name of the person who would receive me in my new prison. And I didn't care. The plane took off, carrying my last hopes into the gray clouds over Asheville. 8 hours of flying to get to the place where my children had decided I would die alone. 8 hours to process that the family for whom I had sacrificed my whole life had betrayed me in the cruelest way. The flight attendant smiled at me with that professional friendliness while I pretended to read a magazine. But the words blurred between the tears I refused to shed. When I landed in Asheville, the cool North Carolina air slapped my face like a reality check. A man with a sign that read Autumn, St. Raphael's Senior Living waited for me, dressed in a white uniform that looked more like a nurse's aide than a chauffeur. "MS. Autumn, welcome to Asheville," he said with the forced politeness of a man who works with discarded seniors. The drive to the facility was a tour through my new reality. Unfamiliar streets, a familiar language but strange accents, faces that would never know or remember me. Asheville was a beautiful city, but for me, it was a golden prison where I would serve my sentence of oblivion. St. Raphael's Senior Living rose like a palace of white marble, with perfectly manicured gardens and windows gleaming in the afternoon sun. It was exactly like the photos in the brochure. Beautiful on the outside, cold on the inside. The director, a woman in her 50s with a businesslike smile, greeted me in the lobby as if I were a tourist arriving at a luxury hotel. "Ms. Autumn, how lovely to have you with us," she said, scanning my papers with the efficiency of someone processing human merchandise. "Your family told us a lot about you. You'll be very comfortable here. We have activities, physical therapy, entertainment, everything someone in your situation needs." My situation, as if being abandoned by my own children were a disease with a scientific name. I was assigned room 204. A small but clean room with a view of the garden, where I would spend my last years watching flowers grow that others had planted, while my own children sold the flowers I had nurtured for decades. The first night at St. Raphael's was the longest of my life. The bed was comfortable, the food acceptable, the staff friendly, but none of it could fill the emptiness in my chest. In the common room, old people played cards, others watched TV, some painted landscapes. Everyone acted as if it were their choice to be there, and not a condemnation. Maria, my roommate, was 80 years old and had lived in the facility for 3 years. "It hurts at first," she said, as she got ready for bed. "But then you get used to it. The children have their own lives. We've done our time." Her resignation made me feel more pity than anger, as if she had accepted that motherhood was a temporary job with an expiration date. In the first few weeks, I tried to call Chase and Skylar, but they always had excuses. "We're so busy with work right now, Mama. We'll call next week. We can't talk now." Slowly, I realized that my deportation also meant my social death, my gradual erasure from their lives, until I became a ghost of the past. The letters I wrote them came back unopened. The emails were rejected, as if my address had been blocked. It was as if Autumn had died the day I boarded that plane, as if the woman who had raised, fed, educated, and loved them unconditionally had never existed. One afternoon, while strolling through the facility's gardens, I overheard a nurse on the phone talking about a resident whose family had sold her house without her knowledge. "It happens all the time," she said with the calm of a person who had seen it 1,000 times. "They bring them here and then forget they exist." Her words made my blood run cold, because I knew she was talking about me. That night, I decided to do something I should have done on the very first day. Call my attorney in Los Angeles. Patricia Hayes had been my legal advisor for 15 years, a woman of integrity who knew all my possessions, investments, and important documents. If anyone could help me, it was she. "Autumn, where are you?" was the first thing she asked when she heard my voice. "Your children came to my office and said you died of a heart attack in North Carolina. They even had a fake death certificate."
My world crashed around me.
My own children had legally killed me to expedite the inheritance. Patricia, I'm alive, and I need your help, I said, my voice broken. I told her everything: the fraud, the facility, the fake documents, the sale of my house, the entire devilish plan they had executed with military precision. Every word that came out of my mouth sounded like something from a horror movie, but it was my reality. Autumn, this is outrageous. If they presented a forged death certificate, they committed document forgery. But you have to return to Los Angeles so we can take legal action. Return. The word sounded impossible from my North Carolina prison, but Patricia was right. I couldn't fight from afar. How can I get out of here if I'm legally deemed incompetent? I asked, as despair threatened to choke me. Leave that to me, she replied with the determination I had always admired in her. I'll send a legal representative to Asheville. This won't stand. In the following days, I pretended to settle into the facility, while inwardly planning my escape. I smiled during group activities, participated in therapy, ate in the common room, all while my mind raced, planning my revenge. Patricia's representative, a Spanish-speaking attorney named Ricardo Morales, arrived a week later. He reviewed all my documents and confirmed what we already knew. My admission was based on fraudulent papers and a lie. Ms. Autumn, you are here illegally. This is kidnapping disguised as medical care. Ricardo worked like a private investigator for 2 weeks, collecting evidence of the fraud my children had carried out with the precision of professional criminals. Every day I spent in the facility, I played the resigned old woman they expected, but inwardly, I seethed with rage, planning every step of my counterattack. Autumn, it's worse than we thought, Ricardo said during one of our secret meetings in the facility garden. Your children not only faked your death but also sold your house, emptied your bank accounts, and are living like millionaires with your money. Each word was another stab in my already shattered heart. Patricia called me every evening to coordinate the rescue operation. We have to get you back without them knowing. If they find out you're alive before we act, they'll hide the evidence, and it will be impossible to recover your assets. It was a race against time, where every second counted. My plan took shape when I discovered there was a computer for residents at the facility. At night, when everyone was asleep, I crept downstairs to check my online bank accounts. What I saw confirmed my worst fears. My life savings were gone, transferred to accounts I didn't recognize. Chase had opened accounts in the names of shell companies to launder my money. Piper had bought the lakefront condo she had always dreamed of, with my savings. Skylar had paid for her children's private school with the money I had set aside for my own medical expenses. It was a systematic betrayal, planned down to the smallest detail. But my most devastating discovery came when I found Piper's social media profiles. She had posted photos of my house, completely renovated with new furniture purchased with my money. In one picture, she was toasting with champagne in the garden, celebrating the new phase of her life. Her friends' comments congratulated her on having freed herself from the toxic mother-in-law. Skylar was even more cruel. She had uploaded a video of herself crying, explaining how difficult it was to lose her mother to senile dementia, and thanked her followers for their support during this difficult time. 500 people had offered condolences for my alleged mental illness. That night, I couldn't sleep. Seeing how my own children had turned my destruction into social media content filled me with a rage I didn't know I possessed. But that rage transformed into cold determination, into a revenge plan that would be as perfect as their deception. A week later, Ricardo brought encouraging news. Patricia has filed criminal charges for fraud, document forgery, and unlawful appropriation. She has also obtained a court order to freeze all accounts connected to your name. Justice was beginning to move, slowly but unstoppably. But Autumn, he added seriously, you must return soon. The investigation will move faster if you testify in person. Returning meant facing my children, looking them in the eye, knowing what they had done, and feigning surprise when they saw me rise from the dead. My escape from the facility was easier than I expected. Ricardo had prepared all the legal documents to prove that my admission was fraudulent. The director of St. Raphael's apologized profusely, explaining that they had acted in good faith, based on documents that appeared legitimate. Ms. Autumn, we are incredibly sorry. Nothing like this has ever happened at our facility before. The flight back to Los Angeles was completely different from the flight out. I was no longer a beaten old woman deported by her children, but a woman planning the sweetest revenge of her life. Every mile that brought me closer to home was a mile closer to justice. Patricia awaited me at the Los Angeles airport with a smile I hadn't seen since the discovery of the betrayal. "Autumn, you're glowing," she said, hugging me as if I were a sister returning from war, ready to give these ungrateful children the surprise of their lives. On the drive to my city, Patricia brought me up to date. Chase had bought a luxury car. Piper had undergone extensive plastic surgery at the city's most expensive clinic. Skylar had completely renovated her house.
I'll with my money.
"But they can't touch another cent," she said. "Do they know I'm back?" I asked, my heart pounding with excitement. "They have no idea. Officially, you're still dead to them. They're going to get the surprise of their lives when you show up at the court hearing next week." Patricia had booked a hotel for me near downtown, where I could prepare for the final confrontation without my children suspecting a thing. "Autumn, I've been collecting evidence for the past few months. I have audio recordings, screenshots, bank statements, everything we need to prove their guilt." That night, alone in my hotel room, I looked in the mirror and recognized a different woman. The months in North Carolina had hardened me, given me a strength I didn't know I possessed. I was no longer the naive Autumn who blindly believed in family love. I was a wiser, stronger, and definitely more dangerous Autumn. "Tomorrow, we begin the counterattack," I said to my reflection, as I got ready for bed. For the first time in months, I slept like a baby, knowing that justice was on my side and my ungrateful children were about to learn the most expensive lesson of their lives. The morning of the confrontation arrived like a sunrise of justice. Patricia had planned everything with the precision of a general preparing a decisive battle. "Autumn, today your children will find out they killed the goose that laid the golden eggs. But the goose has risen, and she's angry," she said, as we reviewed the documents one last time in her office. The plan was perfect. Chase and Skylar had been summoned to the law office to sign the final papers for their deceased mother's inheritance. They thought they were receiving deeds to more properties they had discovered in my records. Their greed had blinded them so much that they suspected nothing when Patricia urgently summoned them. "Are you ready?" Patricia asked me as we walked to the law office conference room. My heart beat like a war drum, but my mind was as cold as steel. "More than ready. I've waited months for this moment." We arrived early and positioned ourselves strategically. I would remain hidden in an adjoining office, hearing everything through the slightly open door, waiting for the perfect moment for my triumphant entrance. Patricia had a recorder on her desk and cameras installed to document the entire encounter. Promptly at 10 o'clock, I heard the familiar voices of my children in the hallway. Chase spoke with the arrogance of a nouveau riche, an arrogance he had developed while spending my money.
"I hope this is the last signature."
"I've had enough of all this paperwork," he said, as his expensive leather shoes clicked on the marble floor. Skylar laughed with that false laugh she had perfected to conceal her malice. "At least this process is over now. Mama would have been proud of how well we handled her affairs." Proud. The word made me nauseous. I would be proud to see them in prison for theft and emotional matricide. Piper walked in, complaining about traffic, carrying a designer handbag that cost more than a working family's monthly salary. "How much longer will this take? I have a spa appointment at noon." The spa, paid for with my money, while I had spent months on institutional food and a borrowed bed. Patricia greeted them with that professional smile that perfectly hid her true intentions.
"Good morning, Wagner family."
"Thank you for being so punctual. We have some important matters to resolve regarding Ms. Autumn's inheritance." "More matters?" Chase asked with the impatience of a man who believes he has already won everything. "We thought we had completed all the legal formalities." His voice sounded annoyed, as if bureaucracy were a minor obstacle in their perfect robbery scheme. "Well," Patricia replied, arranging the papers on her desk. "Some irregularities have surfaced that we need to clarify before we can proceed with the final transfers." The word irregularities hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. Skylar leaned forward with that feigned curiosity she used when she wanted to appear innocent. What kind of irregularities? We've been completely transparent throughout this process. Transparent as mud, I thought from my hiding place. Well, Patricia continued with the calm of a hunter stalking her prey, we have received information indicating that the death certificate originally presented may contain some inconsistencies. The words dropped like stones into a still pond. The ensuing silence was so thick you could cut it with a knife. I heard Chase shifting nervously in his chair, Piper momentarily holding her breath, Skylar trying to gain time to process the information. Inconsistencies. Chase repeated, his voice meant to sound confident but slightly trembling.
I don't understand what you mean.
The death certificate was issued by the hospital in Asheville, where Mama died. Every lie that came from his mouth was another confession of their guilt. Patricia opened a thick file full of documents she had been preparing for weeks. Indeed, the hospital in Asheville did issue a death certificate, but it turns out the deceased was named Autumn Wagner Schmidt, not Autumn Wagner Miller like your mother. The sound of papers falling to the floor told me someone had lost control of their documents. Probably Skylar, who was always the more nervous of the two siblings when it came to maintaining elaborate lies. That must be an administrative error, Piper stammered, in that high-pitched voice she used when she was scared. Hospitals make mistakes all the time, especially with out-of-state patients. Every word she spoke dug her grave deeper. How interesting that you mention that, Patricia replied with a smile I couldn't see but could hear in her voice. Because we also contacted St. Raphael's senior living in Asheville directly, where your mother was supposedly residing. The silence returned, but this time it was different. It was the silence of horror from criminals who felt the trap they themselves had built closing in. And what did they say? Skylar asked, her voice so quiet I could barely hear it from my hiding place. It was the voice of a child who knows they've been caught doing something very wrong. They said something very interesting, Patricia continued, savoring each word like a fine wine. They said that Autumn Wagner Miller was discharged 3 weeks ago and has returned to Los Angeles, very much alive, very clear-headed, and very angry about being admitted based on fraudulent documents. The noise that followed Patricia's words sounded like a symphony of chaos. Chairs fell over, stifled screams, footsteps running towards the door. But Patricia had locked the door, and my dear children were caught in their own trap like rats in a labyrinth with no escape. That's impossible. Chase screamed, his voice sounding like glass breaking under pressure. My mother is dead. We saw the death certificate. We paid for the funeral. Every word was another confession of their guilt. Every scream, further proof of their despair. Skylar began to hyperventilate, that broken sound she made as a child when we caught her in a lie. Patricia, this must be a mistake. Mama died of a heart attack in North Carolina. We did everything legally. We consulted doctors, followed procedures. Her voice faded like smoke in the wind. Procedures. Patricia interrupted with a coldness that filled me with pride. Do you mean the procedures where you forged your mother's signature on notarized documents? Or the procedures where you bribed a doctor to certify a non-existent dementia? Piper tried to maintain her composure, but her voice trembled like a leaf in a storm. We acted in good faith. Autumn was sick, confused. She couldn't take care of herself. Everything we did was for her own good. For my own good. What sophisticated cynicism, to cloak their greed in filial love. It was my moment, the moment I had dreamed of through all the cold nights in the North Carolina facility, through all the days of humiliation and abandonment. I rose from my chair with the dignity of a queen returning to reclaim her usurped throne. I opened the door of the adjoining office and entered the conference room like a ghost returned to settle scores with the living. The silence that followed my appearance was so absolute that I could hear my own heartbeat and the sound of 3 souls plummeting to hell. Chase saw me first, and his face transformed into a mask of pure terror. The blood drained from his face as if he had seen death itself. Mama, he stammered, his voice seeming to come from the afterlife, but you're dead. I completed his sentence with a smile I had saved for months. No, Chase, very much alive, very clear-headed, and very angry. My voice sounded different, deeper, more powerful. It was the voice of a woman who had risen to administer justice. Skylar fainted. Literally, she collapsed in her chair like a sack of potatoes. Her eyes rolled back as her brain refused to process the reality of my presence. Piper held her with trembling hands, but her eyes were fixed on me, as if I were a supernatural apparition. Autumn, Autumn, my dear, she stammered, trying to put on that fake smile she had perfected.
How nice to see you. We thought you were.
Her voice broke because she couldn't complete the lie in front of the living proof of my existence. You thought I was dead, I said, slowly circling the table like a predator stalking its prey.
Or you hoped I was dead, because there's a big difference, isn't there?
Chase tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't support him.
Mama, can we explain everything?
There was a misunderstanding, a problem with the papers. His voice sounded like that of a little boy begging forgiveness after breaking something valuable.
Misunderstanding.
I repeated with a laugh that came from my soul, but it was not a joyful laugh, but one of pure justice. Bribing Dr. Austin to certify my dementia was a misunderstanding? Emptying my bank accounts was a misunderstanding? Selling my house was a misunderstanding? Patricia opened another file and began placing photos on the table. Screenshots of my children's social media profiles, pictures of their luxury purchases, videos of their celebrations, irrefutable evidence of how they had celebrated my alleged death while spending my money. Look at this, Patricia said, pointing to a photo of Piper toasting with champagne. Here's Piper celebrating her new life, on the same day you sent me to North Carolina. Was that also a misunderstanding? Skylar had regained consciousness but looked as if she were in shock. Her eyes darted between my face and the photos, as if trying to process two incompatible realities. Mama, we thought it was best for you. The facility was very nice, had good care. Best for me? I exploded with a rage I had suppressed for months. Best for me was to die alone and abandoned in a strange state, while you spent my life savings. Best for me was for you to fake my death to expedite the inheritance. Chase attempted one last desperate manipulation. Mama, everything can be resolved. We can give you everything back.
The house, the money, everything.
It was a mistake, a moment of confusion. His voice broke with each word like a house of cards collapsing piece by piece. Give back. I laughed with a bitterness that came from the depths of my heart. Can you give me back the months of humiliation? The nights I cried because I thought my own children had forgotten me forever? Can you give me back my trust in family? Patricia approached my children with a final, particularly thick file. This is the criminal complaint we have filed against you. Document fraud, unlawful appropriation, forgery of public documents, and kidnapping. Each of these crimes carries a minimum sentence of 5 years in prison. The sound that came from Chase's throat was like the whimpering of a wounded animal. Piper began to cry, but they were not tears of remorse, but of self-pity. Tears for their shattered future, not for the harm they had inflicted on me. Skylar was the first to take the path of pleading, falling to her knees before me like a penitent seeking divine absolution. Mama, please forgive us. We made a terrible mistake, but we are your family. You can't destroy us like this. Her tears dampened the marble floor, but I had cried oceans in North Carolina, and my tears had dried up forever. Family. I repeated the word as if it were poison in my mouth. Families care, protect, love unconditionally. You treated me like trash to be thrown away as far as possible. My voice sounded calm, but every word was infused with months of accumulated pain. Chase tried to approach me with outstretched arms, as if an embrace could erase months of betrayal. Mama, I know we made mistakes, but we can start over. We are your blood, you can't forget that. Blood, I murmured, looking at him with a mixture of pity and disdain. My blood that I carried in my womb for 9 months, that I raised with love, that I protected from all the dangers of the world, and in the end, my own blood was what poisoned me. His words bounced off my ears like stones against a steel wall. Patricia placed a complete inventory of everything they had stolen on the table. A house sold for $1.5 million, bank accounts emptied of $500,000, jewelry sold, antique furniture auctioned. Even my car had been sold. In total, the damages amounted to almost $2.3 million, which they had squandered in 6 months. Look at this detail, Patricia said, pointing to a specific line in the document. You spent $35,000 in a single night at a casino in Las Vegas. $35,000 that Autumn had saved through 18-hour workdays over years. Each figure was another stab at my wounded dignity. Piper tried the victim strategy. Autumn, I only obeyed my husband. Wives have to support their husbands. I never meant to hurt you. How convenient to portray herself as a victim after being my executioner for months. Support as a wife? I confronted her with a gaze that could have melted steel. Support as a wife was filming videos where you cried about my alleged dementia while spending my money on cosmetic surgery? Support as a wife was posting on social media that you had freed yourself from the toxic mother-in-law? The color completely drained from Piper's face as she realized we had seen her posts. Her mask of the loving daughter-in-law collapsed like a wet house of cards. Autumn, those posts. I was confused, hurt. I didn't know how to process it all, she stammered. Confused. I exploded, jumping from my chair with an energy I didn't know I had. Confused was I in that North Carolina facility, wondering what I had done wrong to deserve such a punishment. Confused was I when the letters I sent you came back unopened. Chase attempted one last desperate manipulation. Mama, think of the grandchildren. They love you. They can't grow up knowing that their grandmother put their parents in prison. The grandchildren. Of course, he would use the children as human shields. The grandchildren, I repeated with infinite sadness, the same grandchildren you told I was dead. The same grandchildren who cried at my fake funeral while you feigned grief. Will you explain to them that their grandmother has risen, or that their parents are liars? Patricia then delivered the final blow. Autumn, there's something else you need to know. We found evidence that this was not a spontaneous decision. You planned her admission for at least 6 months. We have emails between you discussing how you would divide her inheritance since January of this year. The ensuing silence was deathly still. 6 months. They had planned my exile for half a year, smiled to my face while behind my back they prepared my destruction. Every hug, every I love you, Mama, every smile had been a performance while they prepared my living burial. 6 months, I repeated, as something definitively broke in my heart. 6 months in which you pretended to love me while planning how to get rid of me. 6 months of Judas kisses on my cheek. It was the most perfect, cruel, calculated betrayal. Skylar tried one last desperate lie. Mama, those emails were misunderstood. We just wanted to secure your future, find the best place for you to be comfortable. Her voice broke because not even she believed her own words. Patricia read one of the emails aloud. I've researched 3 facilities in North Carolina. The one in Asheville is perfect because she doesn't speak the dialect and will be completely isolated. I estimate we'll be free in a maximum of 2 years. The email was from Chase to Skylar, with a copy to Piper. 2 years maximum, I repeated the words as if they were a death sentence. You calculated that I would die of grief and abandonment in 2 years. What mathematical precision to measure the suffering period of your own mother. My voice sounded hollow, as if coming from a grave. Autumn, Patricia said, taking my arm with the tenderness my own children had denied me. Do you wish to proceed with the criminal charges, or should we settle this civilly? It was my moment to decide between legal justice and personal revenge. I saw my 3 executioners trembling before me, hoping that my maternal love would be stronger than my thirst for justice. 4 years, I had been Autumn the mother, Autumn the protector, Autumn the forgiver of everything. But that Autumn had died in that North Carolina facility. Proceed with all charges, I said with a firmness that surprised even myself. I want you to pay for everything you've done to me. Every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of humiliation. It was my complete resurrection, my transformation from a victim into an avenger. 6 months after that day in the law office, I wake up every morning in my new house by the ocean, a house I bought with the money I recovered from my treacherous children. The sound of waves crashing against the rocks is the only music I need to accompany my morning coffee, served in porcelain cups I chose myself, without the pressure of pleasing anyone but myself. Justice moved slowly but relentlessly. Chase was sentenced to 8 years in prison for aggravated fraud and document forgery. Piper received 6 years as an accomplice, and her lakefront condo was seized to pay restitution. Skylar, considered less culpable, received 5 years probation and community service in a senior living facility. What poetic irony that she now has to care for abandoned seniors every day. I got every cent of my stolen money back, plus interest and penalties that the judge deemed appropriate. Millions of dollars returned to my accounts, but more important than the money was recovering my dignity. Patricia became not just my lawyer, but my dearest friend, the sister I never had, but whom fate granted me in my golden years. My new will is a masterpiece of legal artistry. My entire estate will be divided among 5 charities dedicated to assisting abandoned seniors. My children will each receive exactly $1, so they can buy a stick of gum and remember the bitter taste of betrayal, as I stipulated in a special clause that Patricia drafted with a mischievous smile. For months, pleading letters arrived, first from prison, then through lawyers, later through mutual friends acting as intermediaries. All of them ended up in the same fireplace where I burn wood every evening, reading books I never had time to enjoy when I was a devoted mother. The fire devours their words, just as they devoured my love. The grandchildren were the hardest to process. Their other grandparents gradually explained the truth to them. And now they understand that Grandma Autumn is not dead, but also not available to those who betrayed her. It is a hard lesson, but a necessary one, about the consequences of familial actions. I hope they understand one day that I protected their ethical future more than their emotional comfort. My daily routine is simple and perfect. I wake with the sun, water the plants in my garden that grow freely, without the pressure of impressing false visitors. I read for hours in my hammock under the shade of a tree I planted the day I moved in. In the afternoons, I paint watercolors of the seascape, something I always wanted to do but never had time for because I was busy being the perfect mother for imperfect children. The neighbors know me as MS. Autumn, the mysterious lady who came from the city with a story no one quite knows, but which everyone respects. I greet kindly, help when needed, but I guard my privacy like a treasure I've come to appreciate after decades of family intrusion. Dr. Austin, my treacherous doctor, lost his medical license and is facing trial for forging medical documents. His practice closed, his patients left him, and now he works as an insurance salesman. Life has its own way of administering justice, beyond the courts. In the evenings when the sun sets, painting the sky in orange and pink, I sit on my patio with a glass of red wine and reflect on the woman I was and the woman I have become. The first lived for others, sacrificed everything for family love, and believed motherhood was synonymous with martyrdom. The second lives for herself, loves without sacrificing, and understands that respect is earned through clear boundaries.
Llavor no resentment.
Resentment is a poison you drink yourself, hoping the other person dies. I have chosen to live fully, rather than slowly die from bitterness. I feel justice, I feel peace, I feel freedom. My children taught me the most valuable lesson of my life, that unconditional love only works when it is mutual. Sometimes people ask me if I miss them. The answer is complicated. I miss the children they were, not the adults they became. I miss the illusions I had about them, not the reality of what they proved to be. It's like missing a book whose ending was terrible. You miss the hope, not the disappointment. My new will contains a letter to be read after my natural death. In it, I explain that I preferred to die surrounded by dignity rather than live surrounded by hypocrisy, that I preferred honest solitude to false company, that I learned that the purest love is sometimes the one that withdraws when it is no longer valued. This morning, as I write these thoughts in my journal, the mailman arrives with a registered letter. It's from Chase, from prison. Another plea for forgiveness. Without opening it, I walk to the fireplace where the morning fire burns. The letter burns in seconds, turning into ash that rises through the chimney into the blue sky. I sit in my favorite armchair, which I chose for its comfort, not for its effect on visitors, and open my poetry book to the marked page. I read aloud to myself, because my voice deserves to be heard, even if only by my own ears. Outside, seagulls fly freely over the endless ocean. And I smile, because I finally understand that the true legacy I can leave is not money or possessions, but the example of a woman who learned to value herself before it was too late. The sea breeze blows through the open window, carrying away the last trace of the autumn I was, and blessing the autumn I am. I need no forgiveness from those who betrayed me, for I have forgiven myself for taking so long to love myself. This is my true resurrection, not returning to the life I had, but being born into the life I deserve.